Welcome to Bled Talk, the podcast where insightful conversations meet language learning. I'm your host, Samuel Bledsoe, and on this show, we dive deep into a variety of topics with fascinating guests from all walks of life. Whether you're an English learner looking to sharpen your language skills, or simply someone who enjoys thought-provoking discussions, Bled Talk is something for you. From engaging interviews to solo episodes filled with knowledge and inspiration, join us as we explore the world one conversation at a time. Get ready for a journey of learning, curiosity, and meaningful dialogues. Welcome to Bled Talk. Welcome everybody this week to this episode of Bled Talk. I'm super excited. We have Seth with us. He is an American journalist. He writes for the New York Times. He's also a content creator. And those of you who know him here in Brazil, he's known as Amigo Gringo. And he has a lot of great topics that he discusses and speaks fluently in Portuguese, I think in Spanish as well, right? And
Yep.
and English, obviously. He's a native to the United States. And I really want to just go ahead and get right into it. Seth, could you tell us a little bit about you, kind of how it all started and how you got to where you are
Sure.
today?
Thanks for having me. I've been basically working for like 30 years at this point, so I'm not going to tell you the whole story, but I didn't start out as a journalist. I certainly didn't start out as a YouTuber because YouTube didn't exist. I did a bunch of things. I was a teacher in the New York City public school system. That was my first job out of college. And that's where I learned Spanish, actually, because it was at a time where there was just huge immigration of students and adults, of course, also from the Dominican Republic and Colombia and Ecuador. And so I taught in a school that was mostly Spanish-speaking parents anyway. The kids usually spoke pretty good English. So I learned Spanish. I ended up working for the Prefeitura, the city government of New York, a few years after that. And I sort of slid into journalism because I had spent so much time in the Bronx. And I was like writing. So I sort of slid into journalism. I took a class at night about how to get yourself published and ended up writing a lot of stories about immigrants in the Bronx. That was kind of my specialty a long time ago. But that also taught me to interact with other cultures and to work in other languages, although at that point it was mostly Spanish. At some point around when I was 33, I started studying Portuguese. It was just the suggestion of a friend. You speak fluent Spanish and you're a journalist. Well, by that time I was a full-time journalist, and he said, why don't you just learn Portuguese? Because I know Brazilians love to say that Portuguese is very hard. But if you speak fluent Spanish, Portuguese is just not that hard. And you're already, way over halfway there. And it's just a question of learning all the quirky, weird things about Portuguese that are difficult, but you already have all the stuff that's easy from Spanish. So all the verb when we grew up, as you know, I don't think you didn't speak another language growing up, right? You just spoke English.
No, for me it was it was English, and like there was a little bit of Spanish in school, but it was that public school Spanish.
But just to explain to Brazilians why Spanish makes Portuguese so much easier, it's not just the words that sound the same. It's like we don't even really learn about conjugating verbs in English. Like there's not that much. Of course, we have slightly different conjugations, and the verb to be is different, but we don't actually learn that. We just kind of know it. So then when Spanish or French or something comes along, we're like, what? It's like 18 different conjugations for a verb. Like, it's so weird. It takes a little while to settle in. But then when you get to the next language, you're like, oh, yeah, verb conjugation. That's easy. Oh, the adjective has to match the gender of the noun. Oh, I have to say carro vermelho. I can't say carro vermelha. Like, that stuff we don't have in English. But it seems like every other language has it, or at least Romance language. So it was pretty easy for me to learn Portuguese. And I started, as part of that process, traveling to Brazil on my vacations from work. And, there's a pretty famous story that you can hear me tell a million times about how my first trip to Brazil, I actually entered Brazil through the Colombian border in Amazonas and took a boat for 4 days. from the border of Colombia to Manaus, and that was my first Brazilian experience. And I did it on purpose because someone had told me that in that boat, you know, first of all, no one has anything to do. There's no cell phone signal. There's certainly no internet, and you're just like sitting around on your hammocks all day talking, and people pretty much don't speak English. So I actually got like 4 days straight of Portuguese lessons, and probably learned more in 4 days than I had learned in like 2 years of studying Portuguese. So that was my first trip to Brazil. I ended up getting a job in Brazil about 4 years later as a journalist. I really wanted to live outside the United States. By that time, I was 38, and I'd never lived outside the United States. I traveled a bit, but so I came to Sao Paulo. I worked for a few years, but and this is so hard to believe now. But at that point, the Brazilian real, was worth a lot of money. So it was about 1.6 reais to a dollar.
Wow.
Which is very hard to believe today. But so if you were an American working in Brazil and making dollars, you actually didn't make that much money. So I actually only stayed for 2 years because I wasn't making enough money, which is very ironic today because, of course, now the dollar is worth so much. But I actually left, but I never completely left. I kept coming back a few months a year, visiting friends and writing articles. And then in 2014, a friend of mine had this idea to make a YouTube channel from my perspective about New York, but for Brazilians. And so that's how the Amigo Gringo channel got started. And that's all, almost 10 years old now. I'm also on Instagram and TikTok and all that stuff, but I don't have quite as big of a following. So YouTube is still the main thing. I love doing YouTube for Brazilians. I love interacting in the comments. People are usually pretty nice. They love my mom, so that's a good way to. My mom appears a lot in the video. She's 85 years old. And my family, my brother. I also, some of the stuff is still about New York, but most of it is about my travels in Brazil. And people know I'm friends with a lot of the other YouTubers and Instagram people and influencers and content creators. And, it's become, as you know, this sort of whole world of gringos in Brazil. I'm not sure I really understand exactly why. I mean, I understand why people like the English teachers, but I don't know why they're so into everyone else. I guess it's a little bit of that old complexo de vira-lata or something, but whatever it is, it's pretty fun to interact with Brazilians, and I appreciate how much they're interested in my life and when I'm in New York, and then also like my thoughts about Brazil. I've learned a huge amount from followers, especially because I do spend a lot of time in Sao Paulo, and like a lot of gringos, I also go to Rio, and I mean, I've been to almost every state in Brazil. I've been to a lot of places, but still, mostly I'm in Sao Paulo, and so it's really good to say something and have people write in from like Rio Grande do Sul or Mato Grosso and say, "Oh, that's just Sao Paulo. That's not all of Brazil." Of course, sometimes I don't think they're right. Like sometimes I'll say, "Oh, people are always late in Brazil," and then someone writes in from the south. Wait, are you in Curitiba? Where are you?
Yeah, I'm in Curitiba, but
all right. So like,
I always tell people that my Brazilian birth was in São Paulo, so I also São Paulo was.
So I don't know how you feel about this, but like I'll say like, "Oh, the Brazilians are so late so often," and someone from Curitiba writes and said, "Oh, we're not late." I'm like, "No, you're not as late.
It's a universal thing.
You're less late, but you're not late compared to people in Rio who are much later than people in Sao Paulo, or much later than people in Curitiba, but you're still kind of late sometimes." Anyway, so that's sort of where I stand today. I mean, I still write, as you mentioned, for the New York Times. I'm currently write a column. If people really want to practice their English, they can read my column called Tripped Up, which is a trocadilho. It's a pun because it comes from trip, meaning like a vacation, and tripped up is a phrasal verb.
Yeah,
to trip up is to cause a problem for someone, or to cause somebody to to I don't know. I don't know. You're the English teacher. How would you
I would say
explain tripped up?
tripped up is kind of like just saying like stumbling or somebody just
Yeah,
not being able to flow. There's just a lot of problems, a
yeah.
lot of things start happening.
Something went wrong, and you got tripped up. And so people write to me with their travel problems, like usually when an airline or a hotel or a car rental agency, um, you know, treats them badly, or at least they think they've been treated badly. They write to me, and then I like investigate the problem. Unfortunately, a lot of the people who write to me actually turn out to be wrong themselves. Like they expected too much. Like, yeah, I mean, the I like to exaggerate it, and this people don't really complain about this, but like the exaggerated version would be, oh, I went to the beach for a week and it rained, so I want my money back. Well, it rains sometimes, you know.
Right.
Like your car, even the best rental car breaks down sometimes. Like, you know, you can't control the world. You can expect good service, you can expect them to come tow you, but you can't then sue them for $5,000 because you didn't get to the beach on time. That sort of a thing. But then some. Those are not the articles I do, though. It's when people write in with real problems that they really did get treated badly that I write about. So that's pretty much me. I have a pretty good life. I also teach journalism in New York. So usually when I'm in New York, it's because I'm teaching. I teach a class at New York University to undergraduates, which your listeners would know as graduação. It's kind of funny that we say undergraduate, but to them it's graduação. But to us, that sounds like graduate students, which for really is post-graduação. It's all very confusing.
It's confusing sometimes, and then it's like it goes all the way even back to like college, right? If you say, "Oh, I went to college," and the person's like, "Well, everybody goes to college.
Collegio.
Did you go to university?" And it's like, "Oh, well, hold on, you have to go to that."
Exactly.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. I love your story. I think that it's amazing because sometimes I think just about how, for example, you came into Brazil and you decided to come through the Colombian border, and you kind of had. It almost sounds like you had what Americans think of Brazil whenever, like Americans who have never been to Brazil usually have this idea of like Rio, forest, and soccer. Those are like the things.
Yeah. Oh, don't forget samba. Don't forget Carnival.
And samba and Carnival, right? So when that happens. And so you came in on a boat, because I've been to, my wife, she's actually from Manaus. And so
cool.
I've been to Amazonas, and I love Manaus, and one thing that I really love about Manaus is that it's a city, but like right outside of the city, it just turns into this massive forest. And so
right. You can't even really get that far outside the city if you drive. Like you can go like an hour. I mean, unless you can go up towards like Roraima, but you can't go really any other direction. It's suddenly you're in the middle of the forest. It's pretty cool.
It's interesting. It's really cool because when I first came to Brazil, my experience was a little different. Like many, I was a missionary for my church. And are
you a Mormon? Is that what you're trying to tell me?
Yeah, that's what I am.
That's not the official word, right? That you're a member of the Church of the Latter-day Saints or something like that.
Yeah, you've even heard that. Yeah, it's the Church of Jesus Christ, the Latter-day Saints. But yeah.
So are you telling me that when you first came to Brazil, you had a little black name tag on?
I had a little black name tag. I had the tie. It was, for some reason, we had to wear a white shirt that was just always sweaty and drenched the whole time. But yeah, that was my first experience with São Paulo and with just Brazil in general. And I remember because, when I was told that I was going to go to Brazil, I was like, oh, okay, this will be fun. And I was thinking, oh man, there's going to be this forest and things like that. And then I get to São Paulo and I was like, is there a forest here?
Sure.
Like, where are the trees? It's just this huge concrete jungle, right? And so, lots of
people definitely have misconception, but then I do get annoyed when people are like, oh no, in Brazil, there's no monkeys in the street. We don't live in the forest. Some people do.
Yeah.
And actually, you go to Minas Gerais in some of these small towns. These are beautiful like colonial towns, there are monkeys in the street. Sorry.
Yeah, I'm in the state capital, and I can tell you that I live in a little apartment complex. In the back area where they have the dog playing area, there's monkeys. They move around on the streets, and there are monkeys here. Like there are things, some of it's true.
So, I mean, Brazil is such a well, I don't know how you feel, but I always think Brazil is kind of like the United States. It's just it's a massively diverse country in every possible way. Like we have in the United States, I live in New York City, but I would be the first to say that New York City is not typical America, or the United States, before I get into trouble for calling it America. There's lots of, well, I mean, my friend from college, my roommate from college lives in Idaho. I'm going to LA this weekend for work. There's the whole South that is a completely different culture and a different accent. I mean, it couldn't be more different. And then, like, I remember in 2014, I went to the World Cup was in Brazil, which was amazing. And I don't know, were you in Brazil then by that time, or was that before your time?
That was a couple of years right before I came. Yeah.
Right. So I remember we were walking, just a bunch of people in like American USA shirts were walking to the game. The first game was in Natal against Ghana, and there were religious. They were someone religious handing out pamphlets or something like that to everyone, and of course they didn't know I spoke Portuguese, because most of the Americans walking by were not. And I was walking with a group of people, sort of look more like you than like me, like blonde hair, red hair, whatever, really white, light skin, and they all like, look, Americans really look like they're loiro and olhos azuis, and like blonde hair and blue eyes, and like they really look like that. I'm like, well,
some of them too.
Some of us look like that. We have black people, we have lots of Mexican Americans. We have lots of Asian Americans, but it is funny. Like every country has a stereotype of every other country, and I think it's pretty natural, right? Because you can't. The world is just way too complex to really, like. I think of Japan. I always think about Japan. When I think of Japan, all I think about is like people running around big cities eating sushi. But I know for a fact that, first of all, there's a lot of Japanese food that's not sushi, and there's a lot of like farms in Japan, and there's a lot of little towns, and like, but why do I just always think about people in Tokyo getting on the subway that goes really fast and eating sushi? Because it's just a natural human thing to do, to try to put people in, to generalize about things,
right?
Which of course is not right, but I wish people, both Americans and Brazilians, would be a little more understanding about our more simplified ideas about each other.
That's a really interesting comment. I completely agree with you, because I always tell people, when there's a stereotype, it's usually because a large group of those people did that thing. They kind of repeated it or whatever it is, but that doesn't mean that it's everybody. But understand that, for example, I always tell people in the U.S., some people get really angry when the Americans don't know about like the culture, they don't know about geography or whatever it may be, and they're like, oh, how can they not know that Brazil doesn't speak Spanish? And what I tell them is, I'm like, but you have to understand that we don't watch movies from Brazil. We don't get a lot of culture from you guys. And it's not that like, oh, I'm not going to watch anything from Brazil. That's not how it is. It's just not there. It just doesn't show up. And so, we don't have that exposure like they have of us.
Well, I like to, of course, that exact same thing happens to me. And I like to ask them, and not in a mean way, but in a sort of a inquisitive way, like, oh, do you know what language they speak in Nigeria? And they're like, oh, well, Nigeria's in Africa, it's far away. I'm like, it's not really any further away from New York than Brazil is. I'm like, oh, but it's a small country. It's a small country. It is the most populous country in Africa. I don't know how many people live. It's almost as big as Brazil in population. What language do they speak? And Well, they speak a lot of languages but the official language is English. Like, what? You didn't know that people in Nigeria spoke English, and most people don't know, right? And I just like to show them that, like, they also, just because everyone knows about us doesn't mean we're suddenly going to know about everyone else. And it is partially because we're not that great at geography. That's true. We definitely look within ourselves. We don't think too much about the rest of the world, but that's part of it. But another part of it is perspective. I mean, if you're going to expect us to know about the whole rest of the world, well, you better also know that Pakistan, which has like 180 million people, it's not that much smaller than Brazil, the main language is Urdu. If you don't know that the main language of Pakistan is Urdu, don't blame me for not knowing that the main language of Brazil is Portuguese. But I don't get confrontational about it. I just think people need to understand the perspective and be a little bit kinder about. And then again, why? I mean, the U.S. also does a lot of bad things, so it's okay if you want to be bad at us.
But I don't think it's like, oh, you being the American, like standing up for Americans, but just helping them understand that, like, if you're going to expect me to be a citizen of the world, then you also
you need to be also. And of course, some Brazilians do know that the language of Nigeria is English, but the average person, the average Brazilian, the average American, the average any person in the world simply doesn't know that much about the whole world because it's a very big world. And
I think something, especially you probably can attest to this, is that I think the more you travel, the more you realize that you just don't know that much.
Absolutely. Well, and this is back to the Japan thing. Like, I haven't been to Japan, but I've been to enough places, and every time I get to the place, it's much more complicated than I thought it was, and I realized how little I knew. I mean, I bet, like, just take an example of a place that even Brazilians usually haven't been to, Acre, right? The state of Acre. They love to make fun of it. They love to say, oh, it doesn't exist. Oh, the dinosaurs live there. I mean, it would be interesting to know what people really thought was in Acre. And then I bet if they went there, they would find it to be, pretty much certainly like Amazonas, but also a lot like, if you go to the capital, they got shopping malls, they got fast food places. I mean, it's not really that different from the rest of Brazil. I haven't been. It's the only state I haven't been to, by the way. I need to go.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you. I think, and that's something that I try to tell people as well when they ask me about things. And what I think is interesting is also, I don't know if you've had this experience, but like as a foreigner, people just assume that you know a lot about the rest of the world. Like sometimes somebody will ask me, they'll be like, "Oh, for example, what language does Pakistan speak?" And I'm like, I don't know. I know about where I'm from, and that's about it. And that's, another thing you touched on is like in the U.S., I do tell people that I really think that we need to change this thing of people just not focusing on anything outside of the U.S. I think Americans are.
So you're telling me that at the same time that everyone thinks Americans don't know anything about the world, they expect you to know everything about the world.
Right. They expect they don't think they think that they don't know anything, but then they expect you to know more. And another thing, kind of along those lines, that I also wanted to ask you, because I've had this experience of people always ask me what it's like to be in Brazil, what it's like to be an American in Brazil, or because then they'll talk about their friend who lives in the United States and what it's like to be an immigrant or an expat, depending on how you look at it. And and I always tell them, because a lot of people think that Americans get treated like kings and queens in Brazil, like we get treated like we're royalty. And I always tell them, I say, well, when the American doesn't speak Portuguese, or they don't speak it very well, I think people treat them very nicely, and they're like, oh yeah, this is wonderful. I'm like, as soon as you can like understand speak their language, then you get treated just like everybody else. And in fact, when they find out you're from the States and they know that you can understand Portuguese, they then proceed to tell you all the things that that they think about your country and stuff like that. And you're like,
that is definitely true. I mean, I always I always think there's like this curve, like as you're learning Portuguese, as you begin to get sort of okay and you can express yourself, everybody loves you. They're like, oh, that's so cute. Speaks a little Portuguese. Like, if you make a joke in Portuguese when you're first learning it, everyone will laugh and think it's hilarious. And then once you reach a certain stage, suddenly they stop laughing at your dumb jokes and you start having to make like real Brazilian level jokes.
right.
And that's harder. It's actually quite hard to make jokes in Portuguese. I mean, I try my hardest on my channel, but yeah, it is. It's a mixed bag to be. And I also tell people, like, as I told you before we started recording, I'm doing my. I can only spend 180 days per year in Brazil because I don't have a residency. I don't have a work visa. I don't have a residency visa. And they're like, what do you mean? I'm like, yeah, just like you guys. Like you can't. I have a tourist visa. It's easier for us to get a tourist visa than for Brazilians because they have to go through the whole interviewing process and all. But still, like the last time I came into Brazil, I didn't even notice. They only gave me 20 days. Usually they give you 90 days. Like, and you can stay up to 90 days. They give me 20 days. I stayed like 27 days. They fined me when I left.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well,
fine. It's my fault. I didn't notice. They just scribble on your little stamp. They stamp your passport, and then they just scribble in bad handwriting how many days. And I usually, once I got 30, but usually they give you 90 or 60. And so I was just like, I'm only staying 27 days. Who cares? And then I leave, and they're like, oh, I'm sorry. And they go away, and they find me. So, well, we're in the same boat a little bit. I mean, and by the way, and then people like to say, oh, but you make dollars and whatever. I just like to, well, first of all, I don't make that many dollars because I'm a teacher and a freelance journalist. So it is true that I make enough dollars in the United States to be pretty comfortable in Brazil, but not to be pretty comfortable in the United States. Also, when it used to be 1.5 to 1, it was the other way around. And that wasn't that long ago. That was like, 15 years ago. Like, people would come to New York. Brazilians would come to New York and just spend so much money. They would be buying 6 iPads. They'd go to Toys R Us and buy everything for their kids. And they'd go to the Gap or whatever. They just buy everything. In fact, so it just sort of depends on the moment in time and the politics of the moment, and so it's people just need to be a little bit. People just need to realize, you can have these stereotypical views, but every individual that you meet, you give them a chance to be different, right? Like I just found out you're a Mormon, right? So so in my head, I got to be like, oh, so there actually are members. Are you still a member of the church?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So in my neighborhood in Queens, it's a pretty heavy immigrant neighborhood here. So there are Mormon missionaries in my neighborhood, and they kind of annoy me. I'm just going to tell you, they kind of annoy me. So
I understand.
Because they stop me. I'm like, buddy, what are you supposed to be on a mission to this is my neighborhood in the United States of America. Aren't you supposed to be on a mission somewhere else? I mean, I don't know. Of course, I don't know anything. But I mean, I'm always polite to them. But I'm like, oh, no, thanks, whatever. But when as soon as I hear you're a Mormon, I'm like, okay, I have this image of Mormons, but that's not you individually. And also, my image might be wrong. Back up a minute before I start attributing my very ignorant sort of, Brigham Young University and missionaries and whatnot. I know my experience in the world tells me that, first of all, I'm probably wrong about my instincts about just stereotyping a group that I don't really know much about. And second of all, that even if those stereotypes were true, you're a person that I need to get to know separately from that. Anyway, I wish more Brazilians were like that when they met gringos, and I wish, of course, more Americans were like that. We're probably worse about that than the Brazilians are.
I agree. Well, and it's something that I think is really interesting. And real quick, you were talking about visas and things. For example, my wife,
Sure.
we're in the visa process for her to go, and I had to do a visa process to stay here. And I always tell people, I say, the federal police came to my house here to make sure that I was actually married to my wife and everything.
Oh,
And
I can't
so,
believe it.
yeah, and so I tell people that because they think that it's like super easy to just come into Brazil
Yeah.
and get all of these things. And I was like, no, I was like, if you do it, if you do it the legal way, the right way, then you have a process that you have to go through, and then they're just as rigorous about it as the US is. It's just people don't hear about it, and so they, like you said, they create this stereotype that they have going
So
on.
true.
And it's
So true.
yeah, it's really, really, really interesting how all that works. But I agree with you. I really do think that I kind of wish people would stop, just taking the stereotype exactly how it is, and maybe thinking, okay, well, maybe some of it's true, but I need to meet the person. I need to know about them, know what they're going through. Because it's like whenever you say, oh, you said Brazilians are late, and then these people from these cities are like, oh, that's because you're in Sao Paulo. But it's like, maybe that person isn't somebody who's late, but, in general, most of the time,
Well,
it
I hate
happens.
to say this. Now I'm late because what's the point of being on time if you just have to wait around for people?
Right.
Or sometimes if I'm reading a really good book, then I will be on time, and then I can just read my book until the other people come.
Yeah. No, I agree with that. And I think,
I will say,
go ahead.
sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Oh, that New York, like New York, as a New Yorker, people have in the United States have stereotypes about us, right? Like
Oh, yeah.
we walk too fast, we're mean, we say, forget about it, and like we and so I also find that even inside the United States, when I travel, I encounter stereotypes of New Yorkers, which to some extent are true. Like I do talk fast and walk fast and all this kind of stuff. But yeah, it's a worldwide phenomenon. It's of course a phenomenon inside Brazil, inside the US.
Well, and it's interesting because you have, like, for example, I saw a video the other day. This is what I was going to tell you. There was this guy, and I guess he trades money or something. I don't remember, but he makes dollars, and he lives in Floripa, and he just made this video, just going really hard and dogging on the United States socially, talking about how Americans don't talk to each other like Brazilians do, and all of these things. He's just saying socially America is terrible and all these things. And this is an American guy saying these things. And I thought it was interesting because I was like, this guy is like making, putting Brazil on a pedestal, which I'm sure it's nice, because I do agree.
Well,
I love
good
Brazil.
for views.
Brazil,
You got a lot of views.
yeah, it's good views, and I do agree. Brazil's a beautiful place and wonderful. But I told him, I made a little comment because I do like to comment on.
Great, I love it. I love it.
What I did was I said a comment, and I told him, I said, as soon as you start speaking Portuguese, well, you're going to have real conversations with people and understand what people actually go through here. It's not all sunshine and rainbows. I always tell people, if you are an American and you maintain your American lifestyle in Brazil, that's great. It's fantastic. But if you come to Brazil and you participate in that culture of, I don't make enough money to live and things are super expensive, you're going to understand why people act the way that they do. I said, and I commented, I told them, I said, I think what's really surprising about Brazil is there's so many people who suffer and who go through just a lot of hardship with their, financially, but they still seem to be happy and go to these parties and have a good time. That's to me, that's the symbol of strength that Brazil has. But he doesn't see that because he's just.
I completely agree with everything you just said. I mean, it is an amazing strength and ability of Brazilians to separate what's going wrong in their lives and what's going right in their lives. Maybe they have friends, maybe they have a great family, maybe I mean, if you put them in a social situation and give them a beer or a churrasco or a whatever, then suddenly they become very delightful. It's very good at having a good time and being positive in the face. Whereas, like in New York, like if someone's depressed about work or just got fired or something like that, they're going to be like depressed 24 hours a day. Like they're not even going to show up at their churrasco. And then, of course, the churrasco in New York will just have pathetic hamburgers and hot dogs, as all Brazilians know, right? Not really true, but okay, let's just go with it.
Yeah.
But absolutely, and you know, it is also true that people like us who create content for Brazilians, there's a big temptation. You know, the classic video that it used to be an automatic hit, and I've done it. Was like 5 things that are better in Brazil than in the United States. But that's different from saying Brazil is so much better than the United States and like just totally kissing ass. Like that just doesn't make any sense. So either people are doing it to get views and make money, or they just haven't figured out Brazil yet. Like, yeah, people are really nice. Yeah, the weather is great. Yeah, it's beautiful. Yeah, the food is good. But it's also got a lot of problems and complexities and obviously political divisions that are just like ours,
Yeah.
and poverty issues that are worse than ours. And, you know, people are actually not always great to each other in Brazil, just like people are not always great to each other in the US. So I've had it a little bit with the simplicity, but of course, if you're going to be on social media, you're going to have to face a lot of
You're gonna have to
very
keep it
simple.
simple. Yeah.
Oh,
People.
Brazil's so beautiful! I love Brazil.
Yeah.
Yeah, you get a lot of 20-year-old followers by doing that. But like, how about the rest of? How about the thinking,
Right.
like the thinking 20-year-olds and the older people who have been through some things in life?
Exactly. Oh, and that's something that I tell people is I'm like, I've thought about it. I thought about making those videos where I'm just like, oh, look at all this great stuff. But then I'm like, that's not me, and I don't want those people following me because, well, it's not that any followers are welcome, but that's not
Always
my
welcome.
target. That's not who I'm trying to reach out to, and
Yeah.
the reason, because I think it's important that we understand that these places. One thing that I've really learned outside of the United States is I've grown my appreciation for a lot of the things that I had in the United States, but I've also recognized a lot of things that aren't as good as I thought they were, and
Yeah.
I think I always tell people,
100%.
yeah, I tell people, like, when I came to Brazil the first time, I loved it. I fell in love with it. It was amazing, awesome, great. And then I came back the second time when I got married, and it changed. And it wasn't getting married that made that made it so difficult, but it was just living in the society as a normal person, not getting looked at as like the American guy, but just people treating me like a normal person. And I started to really, being honest, I really started to hate it. I started to hate.
Yeah.
Sure, I started to hate being around the people, and I know hate is a strong word, but that's really the feeling. It was just so much resentment, and I think that's what that's what we call culture shock. But after I went through that, I always tell people it kind of turned into that like more mature relationship of like,
Right. Yeah,
I do love this country, but I also know that there's a lot of problems, and I like to talk to people who understand that. Like, they know Brazil is not perfect. They know the U.S. isn't perfect, but there's things that can be fixed and things that we can point out to hopefully help each other in the future.
Yeah, I mean, when I think about it, my hardest time in Brazil was the 2 years I lived straight in Brazil. I actually had a journalist visa, and the real was very strong, and I was not making that much money. I mean, I wasn't poor, but I I had to really watch what I spent, and I was really living closer anyway to being a normal Brazilian. And now I spent only half the year there, and I come back, and I know that, and now I'm starting to spend more and more time there. I know there's going to be these adjustments, like, just like I had to get my like electric bill. I had to go to the, I don't know what it's called in Curitiba, but in Sao Paulo, it's NL. That's the electric company. I
Uh-huh.
don't know if you also have NL,
We
but
have a bill. That's
yeah. So, I mean, because I don't have an RG, an ID or a Brazilian ID, I actually had to go to the actual company and stand in line and wait. And like, it's so frustrating. And like, you get in the wrong line, you get the wrong thing. And then it turned out that the problem I was having was when I moved out of Brazil in 2010, I asked them to turn off my electric bill, but I must have done something wrong, or they must have not have done it, because it kept going for a few more months. Whoever moved into my apartment was basically was racking up an electric bill for me. This is in like 2013 or 12 or something like that. And now today in 2023, I can't get the electricity turned on in my house. And they had to investigate this. And then I had to pay these bills from like 2013. And I just walk out of there and like half the day is gone. And I'm just like, oh, Brazil. Ah. And so it's certainly, but on the other hand, when Brazilians here go through very similar things, right? The Brazilians,
they do the same thing. They're like, oh,
I mean, it really is suspicious when a foreigner says, "I love Brazil." Okay, like I get it, you love a lot of things about Brazil, but it would be like if I said, "I love the United States." Like, come on, be a little bit more discerning. Like, things to love about it. There's positive elements of it, but it's a country with a lot of complexity and a lot of problems that both of the countries are. So it really does drive me crazy. And I realize I'm just wasting my energy, I guess, because when some of the gringos on social media just love Brazil and everything is so great, it just drives me nuts.
yeah, I understand. I see it, and I'm like, this guy's lying. And my wife, she'll sometimes be like, why do you say that? And I was like, it's easy. It's easy to see that, because you can see just how fake they're being whenever they do say
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
Because
So
like you said, when people, it's like if someone goes to the U.S., I have a lot of students who go to the U.S. and they have this idea that they're going to go to the U.S. and drink the water and speak English and poof. But we all know that that's not how it works. And so they get to the U.S. and so they find me and they talk to me and we have class. And sometimes, I can tell that they're nervous because they know that Americans are very proud to be Americans for the most part,
yeah.
and they're afraid that they're going to offend me by asking me like some cultural things. But I always tell them, I'm like, look, you can ask me whatever you want because I'll be honest with you about your culture, and you can be honest with me about my culture, about the things you're going through, and I can help you discern if that really is like American culture or if you're just so happen to run into a bad person. And a lot of times they'll be like, oh, I don't like it here. I can't do this or I can't go, maybe the food, a lot of people don't like the food. And I always tell them it's because they're not in the South, because in my opinion, the Southern American food is some of the best.
Oh well, I'm trying to detect your accent and where you're from. Where are you from in the United States?
So I'm from close to St. Louis.
Oh, you said St. Louis, right? So that's not really the South, but it is
it's a Midwest. It's a Midwest accent with a little bit of South, not a lot, because my mom, she's from Georgia, and so I have that influence.
Bit of South. You got a little bit of South in you.
But
well, you all have good barbecue though in St. Louis, right?
I was gonna say we do know how to barbecue. So when people always tell me, they're like, "Oh, you Americans don't know how to do barbecue," and I was like,
that drives me crazy.
I always tell people, I was like, let me just correct you there. I would say, if you go to a barbecue and they have burgers and hot dogs, because they didn't want to spend a lot of money on you. That's why, because burgers and hot dogs,
good,
super cheap. I was like, if you go to a barbecue and they have steaks on the grill and you see like chicken and all these things, that's because they like you and they wanted to spend
And if they really like you and they're from the South, they've been smoking the meat for like 12 hours.
Yeah. No, the brisket's been on the grill, been in the smoker for the last 12 hours. And
I have a great video to send people. I did a video on Southern barbecue. Actually, New York has a lot of really good Southern barbecue. It's that people have come here and like really gone out of their way to bring in the smokers, and it's actually hard in New York because you have to get like a special kind of ventilation to smoke stuff in a New York building. But I did a video, you know, you can always refer people to it. It's we did it in a place in Brooklyn, and boy, people really reacted. It had a lot of views, and it's like real barbecue in the United States of America at a barbecue place.
Yeah, I always tell people that, you know, there's, and I think it also, you know, like kind of moving into food, like, you know, it just depends on what you like. For example, pizza in Brazil, I'm sure you.
Oh boy, here we go.
Because I know
Pizza
you're
in Brazil.
I know you're a New Yorker, and so you have that thing. Here's what I tell people about pizza. This is my opinion. I want to see what you think. For me, there's three important things about pizza. It's
Okay.
the crust. I think it needs to have a good crust. Needs to have a good amount of sauce. For me, the sauce is very important. And it needs to have a healthy amount of cheese as well. Right. If it has those three things, whatever's on top of it will just make it better. And in Brazil, I always tell people that, you know, for most Americans, I think that that's pretty much the case, those three things. And for Brazilians, it's the toppings. And so they don't focus on the crust. They don't really put a lot of sauce on there. And then, you know, I always say toppings, they're great here, but like the pizza itself, I prefer American pizza. I like Brazilian pizza, but I prefer the American pizza just because of those things.
I mean, I almost feel like I don't need to add anything, because that is exactly my opinion about Brazilian pizza. I will just add a slight caveat, which is that in Sao Paulo, and I think in probably in Curitiba also, there are a few places that are really good pizzerias who actually make a good crust, make a good sauce. But the average pizzeria in Brazil is absolutely all about the toppings. And the thing that I often just can't believe how bad the crust is. I think it's especially the crust, because I don't know what they're doing. It's as if they just couldn't care less. They're like, should we just take some glue and maybe a little bit of flour and just like draw a circle on the bottom of the pizza and just have this like, it's almost like a communion wafer or something like that. Like there's nothing there. It tastes like a cardboard, and they don't even care because it's got catupiry and frango and peas and corn, and like you can't even see the crust. But I'm like, I know the crust is there, and it's terrible. But that's like a cheaper pizza place in Sao Paulo. Like some of the places in Sao Paulo really do make it good, like margarita.
And if you go to, for example, like a pizza buffet kind of place, like they have a special plate for you to put the crust that you don't eat because they expect you not to eat their crust. Like that's how bad it is.
That is bad.
They expect you to just cut off the crust. And I've seen people who don't even eat the bottom part of the crust. Like they just scoop off the toppings and eat the top. I was like, why don't you just get like
it's like a plate? It becomes a plate.
Yeah.
And, I mean, it's we could go on and on. I mean, the other thing that drives me absolutely nuts is they're always tossing olives on these pizzas, and I hate olives. I mean, I respect people who like olives. You know, I respect their incorrect opinion, but I just can't stand them. And just keep those olives off. Nobody asked for these olives. Why are you putting them on? It's like like cheese. It's not like cheese. Cheese goes on a pizza. Olives, and then half the time you call, because I will call. I'm not ordering the pizza on an app, because then where am I going to tell them not to put the olives? I'll call. I say, do not put olives on this pizza. And then a lot of times the pizza comes, it still has the olives.
Yeah.
You might as well throw away the pizza, because once that olive has touched the pizza,
the whole
olive juice has ruined it.
It's nasty. Yeah, well, my tip that I give for not getting olives on pizza is that I tell them, I say I have somebody who is highly allergic to olives in my house,
Oh,
and
that is
if
a
they touch
great
an
idea.
olive, if they eat an olive, they might die, and like they get like super nervous about it, and so they leave the olives off because I agree with you. I always tell people olives were invented for two things: so that Jesus could tell stories with them, and so that they could make olive oil, and that's it. There's no other use
I
for
thought you were
olive.
going to say martinis. I thought you were going to say martinis, but yes, those are olive oil and yes, and Jesus. Perfect. I like it.
That's it. That's all they're used for. And one real quick other thing about food. How do you feel about the hot dogs? Uh, so
Well,
because
I mean, it's
yeah, go ahead.
basically exactly the same opinion. It's like so. I'll tell you my. So the basic idea is it is really fun and creative, all this stuff that Brazilians will put on hot dogs, just like their pizza toppings. But the problem is they forget about the hot dog and the bun. And like, this is, if you go to like a great hot dog place in the United States, you're getting like they're baking their buns like in some like great oven or whatever, and then they're like having these like high quality beef or pork like artisanal hot dog. That's a good hot dog in the
Yeah,
US. Like I admit, like you go to the street in New York, you get a hot dog from the street vendor, it's not that good. But if you go to a good hot dog place, they're
chicken
all
nugget.
about the meat and the bun. If you go to so here's what I always say. I say I bet you could in the big doggone stuff with a ton of stuff on it, you could remove the hot dog and people wouldn't even notice.
I tell people this.
They wouldn't even notice because it's buried so far in there. They're like half the bites don't have the hot dog in it anyway. And
Well,
also, why are they so orange and pink? Like, well, that is the wrong color for a hot
yeah,
dog.
that's a valid question. No, I tell people I always say if the hot dog was so good here, I said, why do they need to pile so many other things on top of it? I always tell people that when they go to the States, if they can, especially in New York, when I went to New York, there was one hot dog place that I really liked. I don't know if you like it, but it's Nathan's. Do you like
Oh
Nathan's
yeah,
hot?
Nathan's very good, right? Yes.
I love Nathan's. And I always tell them, I was like, if you eat a Nathan's hot dog, you'll eat it with very few things on it and you'll be happy
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
it's a good flavor. That's the whole purpose of the hot dog. I always say the Delgone for me is like, it's good. It's just not a hot dog. It's not like,
That's what I say about pizza. I say Brazilian pizza is really good. It's just not pizza.
yeah,
People
there's
don't
a
like that though.
fine, yeah, a
People
little,
aren't too happy when I say that.
no, they get mad about it. But no, that's wonderful. And I love that we share those opinions because
Well,
it's hard.
I have a question for you.
Sure. Go ahead.
Curitiba, how long have you lived in Curitiba?
About
Is that where your
3
wife? I know she's from Amazonas, but is that like
So she's also a member of the church, and she did a mission here too, and then she moved here after that. So she's been here for
someone from
like
Manaus did a mission in Curitiba? Is that what you're saying?
yeah, and for her it was like serving in a whole different country because it
Oh
was
yeah.
very very cold and weather was super different. People reacted different. But yeah, she's been here for like 5 years. I've been here for
What
3.
what is her opinion of Curitiba these days, and what is yours? Because it is the sort of place that the image of Curitiba from other parts of Brazil is, first of all, that things kind of work a little bit better in Curitiba. I don't know if that's true, but also like people in Curitiba think Curitiba is the best. So I'm
So
just curious what your
if you
experience.
lived in Curitiba, and I think this is a good question because after living in São Paulo and being to other cities and things, if you go to an average city here and you look on the streets, you'll see trash. You'll see things that
Yeah,
things that just aren't
yeah,
taken care of.
yeah.
And in Curitiba, you don't see that. There's
Huh.
no trash on the road. They are constantly taking care of the public spaces that there are.
Mhm.
Crime, there is crime, but I don't know where it is. I've tried to find it. Actually, I just
You
don't.
walk around with your phone out in Curitiba?
Yeah, you can walk around with your phone out here. You can obviously, every place you need to. It's kind of like what my dad says. It can be super safe, but you still need to have your head on the swivel and
Yeah,
make sure you're looking around for things.
your head
But
on a
yeah,
swivel.
Curitiba is I'm not going to say it's the best city in Brazil, but it's definitely up there because
I mean, I
we
will say though, the rap on Curitiba is people are not that friendly.
I'll say that's the next part. So like the city itself is great and things really do work. But when it comes to people, I would say if you're an American, people are a little bit more open than Americans.
Yeah.
But compared to the rest of Brazil, it's a little bit less than. And so it's not that I wouldn't say that people are mean. They're just very, like, for example, let's say you're from São Paulo and you come here and you say something and they'll be like, well, that's because you're from São Paulo, like that kind of response, maybe.
Tell me if this is, I mean, like I've just been trained, and Sao Paulo is probably closer to Curitiba than a lot of parts of the country. But I like come in, I'm like, bom dia, tudo bem, whatever. It doesn't strike me as the Curitiba way. Like
No,
people
Curitiba way is you come in, you just kind of be quiet and talk to whoever. It's one of those things where it's like people would tell me, they'd be like, oh, Americans are so cold, and I'd be like, I don't think that Americans are as cold-hearted or whatever as people say. I was like, I think they a lot of times they respect your privacy and they don't want to barge in and like cause a problem. And I think here in Curitiba they have a little bit of that, where it's like they'll talk to you if you talk to them, but it's one of those things where it's like if you don't want to have a conversation, you don't have to have a conversation.
Also, I do also think that part of the bad reputation Americans have of being cold is a little unfair. It has a lot to do with how affectionate they are in public. So yes, it's true. There's more hugging and stuff, and then there's more like I mean, I don't even think it's physically possible for a Brazilian couple to be on the street without holding hands. At least maybe Curitiba. So like, so you're so cold because you don't literally have your hand glued to your wife's or girlfriend's hand in public. I mean, first of all, in private you can be warm, and in public, like, not do that. But also I think that when people go to the United States, the number one comment I hear when they go travel is that people were really nice. And maybe not New York, but like most of the country, and especially the South and the Midwest. I mean, those two regions, people are just known for being really nice.
I agree with you. Yeah,
more like the definition of warmth than that's different, not the degree.
Well, and like you said, I mean, in the U.S., we even have a term for people who, there's too much PDA, right? Like too much public display of affection, and like for us, it's just something that I think people are just uncomfortable with it. Like my wife, for example, when we go somewhere, she needs to hold my hand, because if she doesn't, then other people are going to see us and think that we do not love each other. And I'm like, that is such a weird thought to have, because like in my mind, that doesn't
it's so true.
doesn't go through, because in the US, my parents, I don't think they ever held each other's hand, like ever. I know they love each other, but like I never saw them doing
There's
that.
a more cynical explanation. I mean, that's already not a great explanation, like that people will think you don't love each other. But there's also the explanation, like, if we're not holding hands, that means you're single and you can look at other women, and like other women can covet you or whatever.
Yeah.
And same thing with the opposite way. Like, if I don't hold my wife's hand, men are going to just come hit on her all the time. It's so I don't know. I think that it's not all of it is just warmth. It's a little bit of a defense mechanism against
it's that good old fashioned Brazilian jealousy that exists. And that deserves a whole conversation itself. But
I can't talk about that in public though. That'll be trouble.
No, it's okay though. But Seth, thank you so much for this conversation. I think it's
been fun.
More than productive, been a lot of fun. Can get into hear your thoughts and things. I like that you're not afraid to tell people what you think, and everybody who listens, I hope you guys really enjoyed it. If you have any questions or anything, you can always comment or let us know. I'll have all of Seth's links and things in the description, so you guys can go follow him, watch his videos, and hopefully, we'll be able to talk to each other more in the future. I hope
that'd be great. Well, let me know when you're through Sao Paulo for sure.
Absolutely. No, I will let you know, and we can you can send a signal to all of the Gringo friends, and we'll
Send
we'll
up the Gringo signal.
right, and
Yeah.
we'll get everybody together. But that was a lot of fun. Do you have anything that you wanna say before we finish?
Well, nope. I just appreciate the conversation, and this is, I seems like we agree on a lot of things.
It's interesting, kind of like I said, it's interesting to hear somebody who's went through it all and also kind of like been able to get those.
I do have a final question for you, actually.
Yeah, sure, go ahead.
I feel like you played high school football.
You
I need
know,
to ask.
I did play high school football for a little bit, and then my coach was a real jerk, and I just didn't want to play anymore.
I just
really,
feel like you have a little bit of a Midwest high school football player look to you.
yeah, I think I do too. It was football and basketball. Those were
Oh, okay.
my two big things. I love them very
You're sitting
much.
down, so I can't see how tall you are. If you were tall, I would also think you were a basketball
I'm
player.
about 6.5 feet tall. Yeah, so
Whoa. Okay. Okay. Well, that's okay. Just wanted to make sure you were a true American by
yeah,
being from the Midwest playing football.
I'm the true American Midwest breadbasket white kid, I guess. I don't know. It's good though. But thank you so much, Seth, and
Got it.
everybody. You guys have a wonderful time, and we will see you next time on Bled Talk. Thank you for listening to Bled Talk. Don't forget to subscribe and follow us for more content. We are on all of the popular podcast platforms like Spotify, Apple Podcast, and we're even on YouTube. Don't forget to send in your questions and your suggestions. Thank you once again, and have a great day.